Hello, everyone. It's December 4th and time for another edition with Wednesday with Walton and Newberry here at the Cardinal Nation in video form and via audio at the Sports Network and all your favorite podcast apps. Hello, Blake.
Hey Brian, how's it going?
All right, trying to rest off all that Thanksgiving turkey here and get back in the groove.
I'm right there with you.
So next week we'll have a lot to talk about with the Rule 5 draft, covering the Cardinals. Have two opportunities to pick up players. They have 38 men on their roster if they so choose, and they may lose some players as well. That occurs a week from today, next Wednesday, the 11th. So our edition might be a little late that time because we want to make sure we are able to analyze the moves that the Cardinals make or that are made moves that are made against them. So we're going to talk primarily about Cardinals players in winter ball. But before we do that, there were a couple announcements made this last week of interest. The Cardinals made a hire in their player development organization, it appears. There has been no announcement from the team, but just before Thanksgiving, Matt Pierpont, who was had worked in the Seattle Mariners organization, has announced that he will be the new director of pitching for the Cardinals. Now, the Cardinals did not have a director of pitching in the past. They had a senior pitching coordinator. Tim Levesque has been in the organization for a long time, back to the Brent Strom days for those folks who've been following the Cardinals that long. But it looks like the Cardinals may be having a director of pitching, a director of hitting, maybe even a director of physical development, but we'll have to see. What's your take, first of all, on the addition of Pierpont, a 33-year-old former minor league pitcher, and then organizationally, what signals the Cardinals may be sending with this hiring?
Yeah, I think this was another really interesting hire, and I think as we've seen with the Cerfolio hire too, it looks like the Cardinals are bringing in some younger guys to some really key positions in the organization, and I think that's probably an effort for them to get guys that are maybe a little bit more understanding of some of the more advanced and more modern pitching concepts and some of the math and the numbers that goes into that. Obviously, Pierpont's not just like a numbers guy. He actually pitched, he played the game. I think he likely is going to be a good blend of both of those things. And it seemed that he was pretty highly regarded in the organization and just across Major League Baseball. In fact, I believe I saw somewhere that he was a finalist for multiple like head pitching jobs, like kind of similar to what he ended up getting with the Cardinals in the past year. So it sounds like the Cardinals have a guy who could potentially be an up and comer, and hopefully he can actually make an impact on some of the minor league guys.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how long the Cardinals wait to announce their organization. They have a number of positions to fill, but other organizations are trying to do the same thing. And, in the case of Pierpont, as well as his boss, the new farm director, it looks like the Cardinals are bringing in guys and giving them promotions. And that's the way that teams can basically raid other organizations for talent. If they want him to do a lateral move, chances are the current organization will say no dice. He's under contract to me for 2025. But when another organization comes with an offer for a bigger job with more responsibility, generally speaking, the new organization gets their man.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just, how the game is played. And I think the Cardinals know what they're doing with trying to go out and get guys that they know they're going to be able to get, but also guys that whether it's Bloom or whether it's Mozeliak or a combination of both, think highly of that can actually come in and make an impact.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting change, and it's a reality where the Cardinals are right now, that they're the ones doing the rating where, not too long ago, they were the ones that were rated from other organizations for their own talent.
Yeah, I mean it's come full circle, and I think it's a sign of your organization being a quality organization when you're the one getting rated. So it'd be nice to see the Cardinals kind of bring in some of these younger guys, put in a pretty deep infrastructure in the front office of the coaching staff, and then eventually get themselves to the point where they have so many highly respected coaches and evaluators and front office personnel that other teams are the ones that come in and raid them.
Yeah. And so the other move that the Cardinals organization did announce on Tuesday was, I think this is their third, at least, minor league free agent signing. They signed pitcher Michael Gomez to a minor league contract, gave him a non-roster invitation. They signed a shortstop center fielder Jose Barrero, same thing, right before Thanksgiving. And now outfielder first baseman Ryan Vilade signed to a minors contract, and he will also get a non-roster invitation to spring camp. This one, the guy's only 25 years old, but he's in Ryan Vilade, but he's in his fourth organization. He's had a cup of coffee with his original organization, the Colorado Rockies. He got back to the majors last year with Detroit. Seems like a guy originally looked at more as a power guy, but now is more of a line drive contact hitter. And I don't know about your take. My take is I think he's kind of going to be the Jacob Young, Alfonso Rivas, veteran bat to move between first base and outfield is needed at AAA. I don't think unless injuries happen that Ryan Vilade will reach St. Louis. But you look at the outfield depth in the upper levels of the minors, and it's kind of thin right now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think you're probably dead on with that assessment, but Ryan Vilade, at least, he's not just like a guy that we would just kind of sweep under the rug and say, oh, he's not important. Like he very well could be a guy who just doesn't put up big numbers. He hasn't put up big numbers in his career, but it's easy to see why the Cardinals like him. He, as you mentioned, used to be known as kind of a power guy, hasn't really shown a lot of that in-game power yet, but he still hits the ball hard. His average exit velocity was 90 miles per hour the past season. His max was 112. Those are decent numbers. He hits the ball on the line, and actually what's really interesting is he hits particularly well against breaking balls and off-speed pitches. So he seems like a pretty solid just overall hitter. If the Cardinals can get him to tap into some of that power that he does have and actually bring that into games, he might actually take a little bit of a step forward. Obviously, that's not a guarantee, and as you mentioned, he's in his fourth organization, but there's at least some traits here to be interested in.
Yeah, and Vilade was a top 10 prospect in the Colorado Rockies system 5 years in a row, according to Baseball America. So, again, the Rockies didn't have the best system in baseball, but still, he was a guy that was well thought of, played in the futures game, had a lot of Arizona Fall League, made the Fall Stars game. So he's had a lot of visibility in the past. And at 25 years old, the guy may still have some gas in the tank. So, it's interesting. The Cardinals are selectively adding guys at the major league level. Jose Barrero, who we talked about before, has had significant major league experience with the Reds and was also a pretty good prospect once. So it's not as if, as you said, they're filling this in with guys who are just empty uniforms. So hopefully they'll play and perform well and be ready in case the call is needed.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if the Cardinals are where they are right now in just kind of a reset mode, like you're basically in the talent acquisition mode, and you can get it as cheaply as you can wherever you can get it. And taking the chances on a bunch of guys that used to be highly touted, well-regarded prospects with some actual tools is never a bad way to just fill in your system and see if some of them can stick.
All right, so now let's switch gears and talk about Cardinals playing in winter ball across Latin America. Of course, there's a lot of volatility in the rosters and who plays where. The schedules are different, but they all come together in what's called the Caribbean Series, which this year will be held in Mexico at the end of January and the beginning of February. And in that series are the champions from the four big leagues: Mexico, Puerto Rico, Venezuela, Dominican Republic. And then this time they're inviting Japan, interestingly, to bring a team in to try to win the Caribbean Series. So anyway, let's go through the leagues and talk about the Cardinals playing there. In Mexico, the Cardinals have a couple of Mexican pitchers in their organization, both of whom are ranked prospects and both of whom are pitching now in winter ball in Mexico. Luis Gastelum, who just is appearing in our top 50 prospect list, and Gerardo Salas, who is not yet appeared but will be pretty soon.
Yeah, I think both of those guys are particularly interesting prospects, and it's fun to see them actually get some innings overseas. I'm obviously very high on Luis Gastelum, and I've seen some clips of what he's been able to do out there with this changeup, and it looks just as unhittable to the guys in Mexico as it did to the guys in Palm Beach. So it's great to see.
28 to 4, pardon me for interrupting,
Yeah,
28 to 4 strikeout to walk ratio in 19 innings.
yeah, 137 ERA. By all accounts, he is just continuing his domination and his dominance just into another league that's probably a little bit of a higher level than some of the guys that he saw in single A, and at least facing guys who are more advanced hitters, more mature, who have been seeing professional pitching for a decade now in some cases. So it's a good sign for him.
Yeah, Gastelum's a guy who I think should be able to advance more quickly. You could argue that he had, outgrown Palm Beach even before the end of the
Yep.
year. He's the kind of guy that could blow through Peoria pretty quickly and end up in Springfield before too long, in my opinion.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he's a reliever who relies very heavily on his 70 grade changeup. And a guy who has a pitch as dominant as that pitch is, who can command it in and out of the zone as well as he can, is a guy who should be able to just ride it all the way up to double A, triple A, and move pretty quickly because of it.
Gerardo Salas is just 21 years old playing in winter ball, so he's very young. He's been a little bit roughed up, 4.44 ERA in 7 starts. The strikeouts look good, but the walks and hits are a little high.
Yeah, and I mean he's a guy. It's encouraging to see him still missing bats. His fastball's a bat misser. It's nice to see that it's still playing that way in Mexico. He actually hasn't shown as many walks in affiliated balls he has in Mexico. So we'll see if that's just a small sample size thing, or maybe he's nibbling a little bit, or it's something with his season stopping and starting up again. Who knows? But 34 strikeouts in 26 innings is solid. If he can get the walks and hits down, he'll continue to trend in the right direction there.
Puerto Rico has a shorter schedule. They just began play not too long ago. But the Cardinals have several hitters there. Brian Torres, of course, who folks may have remembered was the MVP in the Puerto Rican Winter League last year, is back again, and he's doing the things that he does, which is hit the ball, take walks, get on base. An interesting guy who was his teammate briefly was Daniel Ortiz. Daniel Ortiz was the Cardinals' 16th round draft pick this last year, and he was the only position player who did not begin his career with Palm Beach after the draft. He interestingly played first base, not third. Only got in 5 games, didn't do well. Probably was sent home. And I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily to have a player that young not succeed in winter ball.
Yeah, absolutely not. I think it's hilarious that we're seeing him playing winter ball before he actually suited up in the organization.
That is rather unusual.
Yeah, I cannot recall the last time that's happened, at least in recent memory. So I mean, yeah, I'm not overly concerned with the stats. Obviously, a very young player playing against guys who are probably in some cases twice his age, honestly, because you'll get like 38-year-olds out there playing ball sometimes. So nothing really to look at between the sample size and the stats, but it is fun to see him actually playing in games.
And then the other hitter that in Puerto Rico, Sammy Hernandez, who's a catcher, who's on the cusp right around our top 20, is also seeing playing time for Ponce down in Dominican.
Yeah, again, none of these guys looks like have really played in a ton of games, so it's hard to read too much in their stats, although it will be interesting to track them going forward. I do think going back to Brian Torres for a second, 33 at bats, he has 13 walks to 3 strikeouts. He's just continuing to do what Brian Torres does, and it's hilarious.
Yeah, and let's face it. I mean, the guy's the reigning MVP. The pitchers are probably
Yeah.
being very, very careful with him.
Yeah, they're not going to go anywhere near the plate against him.
Andrew Marrero, reliever, who's had his ups and downs, is having some ups and downs in Puerto Rico as well.
Yeah, that's pretty much the Andrew Marrero experience, or at least it has been thus far in his career. A lot of strikeouts, a lot of walks. He'll give up the occasional home run. His slider's really good when he locates it. Fastball's not as good. He'll like to throw a lot of sliders, but you just want to see a little bit more consistency out of him. And he's a guy who has legitimately intriguing stuff. He just has never really been able to put it all together, and it appears that is still the case so far in the early returns of winter ball.
Down in Venezuela, there have been probably, I think, 4 hitters who have seen time, but only one of them has gotten significant playing time, and that's Jeremy Rivas, who a year ago was in the Fall League, was the shortstop all season long for for Double A Springfield, and he's batting 286 with a 357 OBP. Not spectacular, but very steady, and that's what Jeremy Rivas really is, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then I mean, it's even encouraging just to see him hitting the ball well because again, he's never really been even an average hitter in the minors. So seeing him hit the ball well and overseas and even having 2 home runs is impressive. I mean, he hit 3, I think, all season in minor league ball. So if he can just show a little bit more of an uptick in power, he's never going to be a crazy power guy. But if we could just see him get into the gaps more, maybe clear the fence a little bit more, all of a sudden you're going to see his offensive profile really start to blossom.
Also in that league is Jose Davila, who's a starter. And again, he's playing up a guy that was in, A ball this year, has an ERA a little over 6, so has been somewhat hittable, but it's nice to see a 22-year-old, pitching in winter ball.
Yeah, exactly. It's nice to see him actually in the rotation too. It looks like he's actually getting some of those longer stints, actually starting games. It's just surprising for a guy who's as young as he is and relatively inexperienced as he is, as a guy who played all season in single A. I would have expected to see him get more sporadic inside the bullpen and not that consistent work that he's been getting. So hopefully the results start to turn around for him, but at least the workload's good to see.
In the Dominican, there's big news in that Albert Pujols is managing Leones in Escogido, and Javier Molina is managing Aguilas Cibeñas. So 2 Cardinals legends are on opposite dugouts in the Dominican Republic this year in winter ball. And there's a number of Cardinals down there as well, including a new addition to the 40-man roster. Matt Koperniak started with Pujols' team, got in, I think, about 15 games or so, and they let him go because he only had a 562 OPS. But again, You don't want to read too much into winter ball.
Yeah, exactly. And it's hard to read too much into a guy basically given 13 games to come out and perform. And if you don't, then you're off the team. Not obviously a ideal environment to have any kind of sustained success. So hard to read into it too much. But we do have a couple guys out there that are looking pretty good. Cesar Prieto, again, hitting 318. It's a very standard Cesar Prieto kind of batting line there. And then Jose Barrero looks like he's having a really solid year. A lot of extra base hits, a lot of walks, a lot of strikeouts. So you can see some of the tools there for him starting to show a little bit.
Yeah, that's interesting. Prieto is doing again, a lot of what we've seen from him, and that is he doesn't walk very much, he doesn't strike out very much, but he, continues to hit. The big question with Prieto will, of course, be is his glove good enough at second base or third base to be a contributor in the majors, or is he going to be a reserve guy? And the good news is the Cardinals don't have to do anything with him yet. He's still young enough. There's not any 40-man roster pressure. Um, you mentioned Jose Barrero. Of course, he's a guy that the Cardinals, just picked up as we talked about, and it would be interesting to know whether the Cardinals had him on their radar or whether, in fact, his performance in winter ball, might have been the difference maker for them bringing him in because he's has close to a 850 OPS, not hitting a lot for average, but certainly showing a lot of power.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's not unheard of for guys who are free agents, kind of, and the quad A guys or minor league free agents, whatever it is, to go out and use the Dominican ball or any kind of winter ball as like a showcase to major league teams to try to earn themselves a contract. So I actually would be very curious to know if the Cardinals were interested in him beforehand. But even either way, it's still nice to see him actually putting up some kind of numbers. And you'd hope I don't not like particularly likely that he's changed anything, but you'd hope that he could maybe sustain some of that success in the minors next year.
That's right. That's right. On the pitching side, there are three pitchers that are on Pujols' team who have Cardinals ties. Um, Victor Santos, who folks may remember was part of the return for Tyler O'Neill from Boston, who had a terrible year with Memphis, but is looking like a world beater in the Dominican. Was in fact the pitcher of the week back a few weeks ago in that league. Connor Thomas, who was a top prospect, now is a lefty reliever, appeared in a few games, as well as Loa A reliever Augusto Calderon. So, what do you think about Victor Santos? Is he a guy that could work his way into the major league pitcher?
I mean, he could be Victor Santos.
Pitcher as a pitcher?
Yeah. Victor Santos is somebody who's kind of interesting in the fact that he hit, AAA at the age of 21 for the first time, missed all of 2023. 2024 didn't pitch particularly well. He's not, so it's hard to know from the statistical profile what's there. I'm not a huge fan of the stuff generally. It's not particularly loud. I think he's really going to have to limit walks and really just rely on his command and his control if he's going to get by, which again is something he actually did incredibly effectively. Like he was walking batters like a 3-4% rate up until he hit AAA, and then it started to take up to that 6-7.5% rate, which is still admittedly good. It's just a little probably too pedestrian for somebody with the kind of stuff that he has. So if he could get that back down to like that 4 or 5% and really just rely on not putting batters on base, not hurting himself, then I think he'd have a chance to be something of a swingman type potentially.
Another guy, the last guy we'll talk about very briefly. We've talked a lot about in the past, Edwin Nunez. Great fastball, but command issues. He appeared in one game for Molina's team. Not clear he's going to be with the team over the long haul, but Edwin Nunez is a guy that I'm hoping the Cardinals leave alone, let him be a reliever and go out there versus, continuing to try to make him into a starter, which he's obviously not.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Edwin Nunez is actually somebody I'm going to be really interested in watching this next season, especially as the Cardinals bring in a new, director of pitching, because I think Nunez is the person who has the most just raw, pure arm talent in the system, potentially more so than anybody else, but it's just completely lacks refinement. His fastball could be very good. It doesn't play very good because it has terrible shape, even though he throws it hard. His slider could be really, really good. It's just not as consistent with both its location and its movement profile. So I think he's somebody who has the potential to improve a lot if there's somebody who can maybe help him kind of tweak some of his pitch shapes a little bit, understand what he does well and what he can do more effectively, and how to really maybe just teach him how to harness that stuff a little bit better. So good to see him get an inning. I can't imagine he's going to pitch a ton more in the winter, but I'm really curious to see if the Cardinals do change things on the pitching development side of the house, what that means for Nunez.
Yeah, and at least four of these guys that we talked about here tonight are also available in this Rule 5 draft next week. Nunez is the kind of guy, maybe some organization takes a flyer on because it costs him 50 grand. If it fails, they send him back. Same with Andre Granillo at Memphis, who we've talked so much about his potential, but again, can't seem to harness his command. And then Rivas as well as Gerardo Salas, who's still probably too young. So any of those guys are guys that, some organization might take a look at in Rule 5.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, especially organizations that really trust their pitching development and their coaching staff when it comes to that could take a chance on some of these guys and say, hey, you have this one like really like Andre Granillo, your slider's really, really good. Can we teach you a pitch to get lefties out? Can we maybe keep you in the zone a little bit better? Like if you have that kind of that carrying tool for them, there's an organization that could say like that might be good enough for us, and we think we can fix some of the other things about them. So we'll see. I'm not expecting probably anybody to get picked, but you never really know with the Rule 5 draft. It's all about teams' internal evaluations and knowing what they do well. So we'll see what happens.
And the other nuance of the Rule 5, and we'll talk more about this next week, is that teams can protect up to 38 men on the AAA roster. And this is a AAA roster just for Rule 5. It isn't the real AAA roster. So, of course, your 40-man guys are not available, not susceptible to Rule 5. They're protected. Then the next layer of guys, you can protect up to 38 guys at AAA Memphis. And then the players beyond that are fair game as long as they've had the number of years of service necessary to become eligible for Rule 5. So it also depends on how the Cardinals manage their rosters. And I would think all four of those players we mentioned will probably be on the Memphis roster, meaning the organization that picks them up would have to keep them in the major leagues all year in 2025 or return them. So it's not completely the cost in terms of money isn't nearly as big as the cost of a major league roster spot for an entire season.
Yeah, exactly. And even just from like the prospect side, I'm sure a lot of these guys would be thrilled to get picked in the Rule 5 draft and get the chance to really stick in the majors. But I do think we've seen examples of where players getting picked a little probably sooner than they're ready to go to the majors can maybe harm their long-term development. So I would not be upset even just from the player's perspective too, of just letting them have the actual patience needed to develop into a regular major league player, even though some of these guys might have individual and specific tools that you look at and think are ready to play right now.
And there's also a little bit of prejudice built in, I think, in the system. I can't prove this, but an organization that's not been doing well necessarily, the Cardinals, at least at the major league level, seems like those organizations tend to get passed over a little more, and the organizations that are hot and that have the reputations for development, tend to be the ones rated more often.
Yeah, like I feel like we'll always see, the Dodgers get rated or Cleveland, especially when it comes to pitching, get rated. Maybe Tampa a little bit, Padres sometimes,
Yankees because they have international guys,
Yankees.
Dodgers,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
But we'll see. So that'll be what we'll talk about next week on the 11th. But with that, we will close the December 4th edition of Wednesday with Walton and Newberry. And we thank everyone for watching and listening in. Talk to you next week, Blake.
Sounds good.